At first, many veterans had leaned toward Gabriel. To them, he looked like the safer choice. His footwork was clean, his reads sharp, and his throws reliable in practice. Offensive linemen, who prize efficiency above flash, reportedly felt comfortable with Gabriel's steady presence. They didn't care about highlight reels, they wanted the quarterback who kept the offense on schedule. But the instant word spread about what Gabriel had been doing behind the scenes, their confidence cracked. According to reports, several linemen felt blindsided, realizing they had backed a player who wasn't competing honestly. Some even confronted him directly, demanding explanations and warning him that credibility in the locker room is earned through character, not whispers. Meanwhile, the receivers had no hesitation choosing sides. They had already grown close to Shedeur Sanders, drawn to his energy, his confidence, and his ability to create big plays when everything else broke down. Once they learned Gabriel had been undermining him, the receivers reportedly doubled down in their support. Sources claim a few even threatened to boycott certain drills if Gabriel remained the starter, a bold sign of just how far the rift had grown. The defense, too, was disgusted. For players whose entire identity revolves around unity, Gabriel's actions felt like betrayal. Defensive captains reportedly made their displeasure known, not in loud speeches, but in blunt, private conversations. The message was simple. If Gabriel couldn't be trusted in the locker room, how could he be trusted in the huddle when the game was on the line? And then came the silent observers, the veterans who had played for multiple organizations, who knew dysfunction when they saw it. For them, this felt like a test, a moment that would either define the Browns' culture moving forward or plunge it back into the same chaos that has haunted the franchise for decades. Some chose neutrality, watching carefully to see how leadership would handle the fracture. Others made it clear the Browns had a choice to make, and it wasn't just about football ability. Because here's the hard truth. Locker rooms don't heal overnight. Trust, once broken, takes far more than an apology to restore. And even as Gabriel's emotional statement hung in the air, veterans whispered among themselves, wondering if the damage had already gone too far. This wasn't just about picking a quarterback anymore, it was about survival. Either the Browns found a way to bridge the divide, or they risked watching their season implode before it even began. If the locker room was shaken, the coaching staff was downright stunned. For months, they had treated this quarterback competition like any other two players battling for a spot, both expected to push each other while raising the standard for the team. But when reports of Dillon Gabriel's sabotage surfaced, the tone inside Cleveland's facility shifted instantly. This wasn't just about football anymore. It was about trust, integrity, and whether the very people guiding the offense could still rely on the foundation they thought they had built. Sources claim the offensive coordinator was devastated. He had trusted Gabriel, praised his preparation, and even leaned on his supposed maturity to help mentor Sanders in the early stages of camp. To learn that Gabriel had been quietly feeding doubts to coaches and manipulating conversations, that stung. Several assistants reportedly felt professionally embarrassed, realizing they may have been unintentionally swayed by Gabriel's narrative. In an environment where evaluation is supposed to be objective, they suddenly felt compromised. Head coach Kevin Stefanski, usually measured and calm, was reportedly furious when the full scope came to light. For a man who prides himself on creating a culture of accountability and honesty, the idea that one of his quarterbacks was secretly undermining another represented more than just bad judgment. It was a direct attack on the standards he had tried to build. Yet, in that fury, Stefanski made a surprising decision. He stepped back. Rather than storming in and dictating consequences, he allowed the situation to unfold player to player. He recognized that if resolution didn't come organically from within the team, any top-down mandate would feel hollow. Meanwhile, the front office quietly reevaluated everything. Talent had always been the headline in Cleveland's strong arms, fast receivers, dominant pass rushers. But now, executives found themselves confronting a different reality. What good is talent if the character behind it can fracture a locker room in weeks? Insiders say the Sabotage scandal sparked conversations about revising evaluation processes, placing a heavier emphasis on leadership traits, communication, and accountability, not just 40-yard dash times or throwing velocity. And then there was ownership. Normally quick to involve themselves, Jimmy Haslam and his circle reportedly remained silent throughout the ordeal. For some, that silence was surprising. For others, it was refreshing. After years of meddling, the decision to let the football people handle the crisis hinted at a possible philosophical shift. Maybe, just maybe, Cleveland was learning that building a winning culture required patience, restraint, and trust in its leaders. Still, the scars were visible. Coaches felt manipulated. Evaluations had been compromised, and the trust between players and staff, that sacred bond in every NFL facility, had been shaken. This wasn't just a quarterback controversy anymore. It was a test of Cleveland's leadership from top to bottom. The real question became clear. Could the organization rebuild that trust fast enough to save their season? Or had Gabriel's actions planted seeds of doubt that no apology could ever fully erase? For Shedeur Sanders, the truth didn't come in one big revelation. It trickled in piece by piece, like whispers behind closed doors that slowly grew louder until they were impossible to ignore. At first, he thought the strange looks from coaches were just the natural tension of a quarterback battle. A missed read here, a forced throw there, and suddenly every mistake seemed magnified. Sanders brushed it off, telling himself this was just part of competing at the highest level. But then, something didn't add up. He noticed teammates occasionally questioning his decision-making in ways that felt rehearsed. It wasn't the normal banter of a locker room. It was as if doubts about him were being planted in conversations, always circling back to his supposed lack of discipline or his Hollywood image. Sanders had heard critics before he'd lived with the spotlight his whole life, but the sudden intensity inside the building felt orchestrated. The tipping point came during a film session. According to insiders, a coach directly questioned Sanders' commitment to learning the playbook, hinting that certain reports suggested he wasn't putting in the same work as Gabriel. Sanders, stunned, pushed back. He knew his preparation. He knew the hours he'd spent after practice, drilling routes with receivers long after the facility lights dimmed. Yet here was a respected coach throwing doubts at him that felt pulled from thin air. Later that day, one of his closest teammates pulled him aside. The teammate, frustrated by what he had been hearing in hushed conversations, laid it out plainly. The doubts weren't random. They were coming from inside. And the source, he claimed, was none other than Dillon Gabriel. Sanders listened in silence, processing each word. It wasn't just disbelief that hit him, it was betrayal. Not because Gabriel was competition, but because he had pretended to be a teammate while quietly working to poison the well. Sanders reportedly didn't explode in anger. That's not his style. Instead, he went quiet, almost cold. Teammates describe him as locking in, his demeanor changing overnight. If before he had carried himself with youthful confidence, now he carried himself with a sharper edge. The jokes slowed down, the focus sharpened. Every rep in practice became a statement, every throw a message. I see what's happening, and I won't let it break me. Privately, Sanders confided in a small circle family, a few trusted teammates, and mentors who had seen battles like this before. Their advice was simple. Don't let the sabotage define you. Let your response define you. And that's exactly what he did. Rather than confronting Gabriel outright, Sanders chose the longer game, winning the locker room through performance, patience, and quiet resilience. The moment he found out wasn't just about betrayal, it was a turning point. Because once the truth was out, Sanders knew he wasn't just fighting for a roster spot anymore. He was fighting to prove that no amount of whispers, no hidden agendas, could stop what was coming. When Dillon Gabriel finally addressed the situation, the football world held its breath. After weeks of speculation, silence, and growing resentment inside the locker room, Gabriel chose to speak, but the way he did it only added more fuel to the fire. The apology came in a carefully worded statement, released first to the media before it was ever delivered face-to-face with his teammates. Right away, that decision drew criticism. Many players and fans expected Gabriel to own up directly in front of the locker room, looking his brothers in the eye. Instead, he leaned on a polished press release that felt more like damage control than genuine remorse. What if I told you that one of the NFL's most overlooked franchises is sitting on a scandal so explosive, it could reshape not just their locker room, but their entire identity as a team? This isn't your typical preseason drama about who's going to start under center. No, what's unfolding inside the Cleveland Browns right now feels more like a high-stakes chess match than a football camp. A battle of egos, whispers of sabotage, and an apology that stunned everyone who witnessed it. See, most quarterback competitions come down to performance: who throws sharper passes, who picks up the playbook faster, who looks more comfortable under pressure. But in Cleveland, the contest between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders has spiraled into something darker. Rumors suggest this wasn't just about football, it was about back-channel conversations, carefully planted doubts, and even attempts to fracture the team from the inside out. And here's the kicker. When it all came to light, it didn't just pit one quarterback against another. It forced an entire organization to look in the mirror and ask itself what it really values: talent or integrity. Now, think about the setting. This wasn't an offhand apology whispered in passing. Reports say the Browns' coaching staff actually cleared out their practice facility, leaving only the quarterbacks, select veteran leaders, and front office personnel in the room. Imagine that for a second. The air thick with tension, teammates holding their breath, and two men at the center of it all, knowing the next words could either mend the team or rip it apart completely. Dillon Gabriel, visibly emotional, eyes locked on Shedeur Sanders, admits he went too far, that he crossed a line, that his frustration drove him into a place where winning the job mattered more than playing the game the right way. And while most apologies in pro sports feel like polished PR statements designed to calm the media storm, this one was different. Witnesses described it as raw, unfiltered, and almost unsettling in its vulnerability. Because everyone knew this wasn't about a blown play or a missed read. This was about betrayal, about one teammate allegedly trying to quietly sabotage another's rise, all while keeping a straight face in public. For a fan base that's seen just about every kind of dysfunction over the past 2 decades, this storyline hits differently. It's not just about the Browns chasing another playoff berth. It's about whether this team loaded with talent, surrounded by expectation, can survive the kind of internal fracture that usually tears organizations apart. And here's the part that makes it so fascinating. Instead of blowing up, Shedeur Sanders didn't explode with anger. He didn't lash out. He handled it like a seasoned veteran, gathering evidence, approaching leaders, and ultimately facing Gabriel head-on, not as a rookie fighting for a job, but as a leader demanding accountability. So here's the question we're left with. Is this the spark that will finally push Cleveland over the hump, transforming chaos into unity? Or is it the beginning of yet another implosion, another chapter in the Browns' long history of what-ifs and almost? Apologies happen in the NFL all the time. A late hit in practice, a missed assignment, a heated sideline argument, players cool off, shake hands, and move on. But what unfolded inside Cleveland's practice facility was nothing like that. This wasn't a simple "my bad" after a blown rep. This was a quarterback standing in front of his teammate, his coaches, and his franchise, admitting to something far heavier, an attempt to undermine the very man sitting next to him in the quarterback room. Reports describe the scene like a movie, but the stakes were very real. The Browns' coaching staff allegedly orchestrated the moment down to the smallest detail. The indoor facility was cleared, no noise, no distractions, no random players walking through. Only the quarterbacks, selected veterans, front office members, and a few trusted staff remained. Everyone else was told to stay away. The message was clear: this wasn't a football drill. This was a reckoning. And then Dillon Gabriel stepped forward. Witnesses say his voice cracked as he spoke. No notes, no script, no polished PR statement. Just raw emotion spilling out as he admitted he had let competition twist him into someone he barely recognized. His words, according to sources, began with acknowledgement of frustration. The frustration of being doubted, of watching a younger, flashier talent steal headlines, of realizing that the spotlight was shifting. But then came the part no one expected. He admitted to conversations, to whispering doubts about Shedeur Sanders' readiness, to suggesting behind closed doors that Sanders' name, not his ability, was pushing him forward in the depth chart. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't defensive. It was quiet, measured, painful. And maybe that's why it hit harder than any outburst ever could. Players who were in the room say Gabriel's apology carried the weight of someone who knew he had crossed a line that talent alone could never erase. But what made the moment truly shocking wasn't Gabriel's words, it was the reaction. Sanders, the supposed target of this quiet sabotage, didn't cut him off. He didn't scoff or dismiss him. He just listened, arms crossed, eyes steady, letting Gabriel put every truth on the table. And when Gabriel finished, there wasn't immediate forgiveness. There wasn't a big hug or a handshake to wrap things up neatly. There was silence, heavy, suffocating silence as the team absorbed what had just been admitted. For the Browns, that silence spoke louder than anything, because this wasn't just two quarterbacks hashing out their differences. This was a public acknowledgement that the quarterback room, the foundation of any NFL team, had been compromised. That trust had been broken in a way that no stat line, no touchdown pass could ever fix overnight. And in that silence, everyone realized something. The Browns weren't just dealing with a quarterback controversy, they were dealing with a culture crisis. If the apology was shocking, the allegations that led to it were downright explosive, because this wasn't about a few heated words in practice or a quarterback simply being frustrated. What surfaced inside the Browns facility painted a picture of deliberate, calculated sabotage, the kind of behind-the-scenes drama fans usually only imagine but rarely ever hear about. According to multiple team insiders, Dillon Gabriel spent weeks quietly working behind the curtain, chipping away at Shedeur Sanders' credibility. Not on the field, but in the offices. He allegedly pulled position coaches aside, planting seeds of doubt about Sanders' command of the playbook, his leadership, and even his ability to handle the pressure of being an NFL starter. And the way he framed it was clever, not outright hostility, but subtle suggestions. "I'm not sure he's ready yet. I think he's getting too much too fast. We can't risk rushing him." It wasn't just whispers, though. Reports claim Gabriel carefully built a narrative. He presented himself as the steady, experienced option, the guy who could be trusted while the rookie developed slowly. He played the role of the professional, smiling in public, running clean practices, saying all the right things. But behind closed doors, he allegedly fueled an entirely different perception that Sanders was a product of hype, not hard work. That the rookie's name, his connection to Deion Coach Prime Sanders, was the real reason he was climbing the depth chart. And for a while, it seemed to work. Some veterans reportedly leaned Gabriel's way, buying into the idea that Sanders wasn't as prepared as the media made him out to be. Offensive linemen who appreciated Gabriel's efficiency in practice allegedly started leaning in his direction. Even some coaches, unknowingly influenced, began second-guessing whether Sanders was being given too much too soon. But then the cracks started to show. Teammates noticed Sanders wasn't rattled by the whispers. He didn't lash out or accuse anyone publicly. Instead, he kept grinding, kept producing highlight moments, kept carrying himself like someone who knew the truth would eventually come out. And it did thanks to one unlikely figure. An equipment staffer reportedly overheard a conversation that laid bare Gabriel's scheme. Unable to keep it to himself, he took the information up the chain, setting off an internal review that unraveled everything Gabriel had built. That's when the locker room began to fracture. Receivers, who had already bought into Sanders' leadership, turned on Gabriel immediately. Defensive players, hearing about betrayal, reportedly expressed disgust. And even the coaches, some of whom had unknowingly entertained Gabriel's doubts, felt blindsided and manipulated. What started as whispers suddenly erupted into a full-blown crisis. The truth was out. This wasn't a normal quarterback competition. It was a political game, one that risked tearing the Browns apart from the inside. And once the sabotage came to light, there was no way back to business as usual. The revelation of sabotage didn't just expose one quarterback's missteps, it ripped open the heart of the Cleveland Browns locker room. Because in football, trust is everything. You trust the guy next to you to block, to run his route, to execute his assignment. Once that trust is broken, even the smallest doubt spreads like wildfire. And in Cleveland, that wildfire started the moment Dillon Gabriel's actions came to light. In the statement, Gabriel admitted to mistakes in communication and misunderstandings that may have caused friction. The language was vague, deliberately avoiding specific details. He didn't mention Sanders by name. He didn't acknowledge sabotage. And he never fully explained how rumors about Sanders' work ethic had conveniently lined up with his own rise in reps. For some, it felt less like an apology and more like a politician's speech carefully crafted to protect his image while skirting accountability. Inside the facility, the reaction was lukewarm at best. Several players reportedly rolled their eyes, noting that Gabriel's tone seemed defensive rather than apologetic. Instead of taking ownership, he appeared to be managing optics. One veteran even told reporters off the record, "If that's an apology, then I'm the commissioner of the NFL." Later, Gabriel did stand before the team to address the issue directly. That moment carried more weight, but even then, his words left the room divided. He expressed regret for letting the competition get the best of him and promised to do better moving forward. But again, he stopped short of admitting sabotage. To some, that gap was glaring. Without full honesty, his apology felt incomplete. Shedeur Sanders, for his part, didn't react publicly. He listened, nodded, and carried on as if Gabriel's words didn't touch him. but those close to him say Sanders saw the apology as hollow. It wasn't about words anymore, it was about actions. And until Gabriel proved otherwise, the trust between them remained fractured. The media pounced on the breakdown. Analysts dissected every line of Gabriel's statement, comparing it to past controversies in sports where apologies missed the mark. Headlines accused him of being tone-deaf, calculated, and afraid of full accountability. Social media was even harsher. Fans of Sanders flooded comment sections with calls for Gabriel to be benched, while others accused the Browns of tolerating toxic behavior. In the end, Gabriel's apology didn't close the wound, it widened it. Instead of calming the storm, it gave everyone more to talk about. What could have been a moment of redemption turned into another chapter in a saga that refused to die down. The locker room was still tense, the media louder than ever, and Sanders more determined than before. And if Gabriel thought that a few words would erase the damage, he learned the hard way. Some fractures can't be fixed with apologies alone. The scandal didn't just expose rumors and apologies, it put Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel under the same microscope, highlighting just how different the two quarterbacks really were. While both were talented athletes fighting for the same role, their contrasting personalities, leadership styles, and responses to adversity painted two very different pictures. On one side stood Shedeur Sanders, confident, polished, and unshaken in the face of chaos. He had grown up in the glare of the spotlight, learning from his father, Dillon Sanders, how to navigate pressure with poise. Even as whispers about sabotage swirled, Shedeur never lashed out publicly. Instead, he let his game do the talking. At practice, he doubled down on preparation, spending extra time with receivers, studying the playbook, and setting the tone with quiet but undeniable leadership. Teammates noticed. For them, Sanders wasn't just a quarterback, he was someone who led by example, proving that respect is earned through consistency. Dillon Gabriel, however, projected a very different energy. Before the controversy, he was seen as a likable, approachable player with a competitive fire. But once accusations surfaced, his body language shifted. The smiles became rare, the tone sharper, and interactions with teammates seemed strained. Some described him as defensive, almost paranoid, as though every conversation carried hidden judgment. While Sanders grew quieter and more focused, Gabriel grew louder and more guarded. The contrast extended to how each handled the media. Sanders, though young, came across as polished and professional. He spoke carefully, always keeping the focus on the team and never feeding into drama. Gabriel, on the other hand, stumbled through his responses, often sounding more concerned about how he was being perceived than about the actual issues at hand. Critics pointed out that Sanders looked like the franchise quarterback, while Gabriel looked like someone trying to hold on to the job by any means necessary. Even their styles of play reflected this divide. Sanders played with composure, making reads calmly, standing tall under pressure, and showing flashes of brilliance that reminded everyone why the Browns had invested so much hope in him. Gabriel, meanwhile, sometimes forced plays, as if desperate to prove his worth. Coaches noticed the difference. Teammates felt it on the field, and the locker room gradually began to draw lines, with some gravitating towards Sanders' steady leadership while others hesitated, unsure if Gabriel could recover from the mess. In truth, the scandal didn't just reveal accusations of sabotage, it magnified who these players were at their core. Sanders emerged as resilient, a young quarterback who thrived under scrutiny. Gabriel came off as fragile, struggling to balance ambition with accountability. And in a sport where perception often matters as much as performance, that contrast spoke volumes. One quarterback looked like the future, the other looked like he was running out of time. When the dust settled, it became clear that the scandal was never just about one apology, one rumor, or even one quarterback controversy. It was about something much larger, how fragile trust can be inside an NFL locker room, and how quickly perception can define careers. The clash between Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel wasn't simply about who would be named Q-Bone, it was a case study in how modern football operates under the relentless glare of media, fans, and front office pressure. For Shedeur Sanders, the episode became a proving ground. Every NFL rookie faces tests, but his trial came earlier than most. Instead of quietly easing into the league, he was thrown into the fire of rumors, sabotage whispers, and a divided locker room. And yet, he didn't flinch. Sanders used the chaos to showcase qualities teams crave in a franchise quarterback: composure, resilience, and the ability to lead without losing focus. Whether or not he won the starting job immediately, the way he handled himself positioned him as the Browns' long-term investment, the kind of player you can build a culture around. Dillon Gabriel, however, faced a different reality. For him, the controversy wasn't just a bump in the road, it was a defining moment. NFL careers are brutally short, especially for quarterbacks on the bubble. The fact that his name was tied to whispers of sabotage, even if never proven, created a shadow that was nearly impossible to shake. In the court of public opinion, perception becomes reality, and Gabriel's image as a trustworthy leader took a major hit. For some executives, that's all it takes to shift a player from future starter to career backup. Beyond the two players, the bigger picture also revealed how the modern NFL ecosystem amplifies every storyline. Social media gave fans a front-row seat to every twist, turning speculation into trending topics within minutes. Sports talk shows fed the frenzy, often focusing more on drama than actual performance. And within the organization itself, management had to balance not just depth charts, but the optics of who represented the franchise. In many ways, this saga wasn't just about football, it was about brand, reputation, and the politics of a billion-dollar business. But perhaps the most lasting lesson was about the value of authenticity. Players, coaches, and fans can all sense when someone is being genuine and when someone is simply protecting their image. Sanders' silence and focus felt authentic. Gabriel's press release did not. That difference shaped the narrative more than statistics ever could. In the end, this story was bigger than Sanders versus Gabriel. It was a reminder that in today's NFL, talent alone isn't enough. Character, perception, and trust are just as critical, sometimes even more. And for players caught in the storm, the way they handle adversity may define their careers far longer than the controversy itself. As the controversy settled into the background, one thing became undeniable. The story of Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel was far from over. The apology, the rumors, the whispers of sabotage, they weren't the end of the drama, but merely the opening act. Because in the NFL, perception changes in an instant, and what seems like resolution today can easily ignite into a fresh firestorm tomorrow. Shedeur Sanders may have walked out of this mess looking like the steady, unshakable leader, but that only raises the stakes for him. Every snap he takes from here on out will be scrutinized. Every throw, every touchdown, every mistake will be weighed not only against his talent, but against the expectation that he represents the future of the franchise. If he succeeds, this scandal will be remembered as the moment that forged him into the quarterback he was destined to become. But if he falters, critics will say the pressure finally caught up to him. On the other side, Dillon Gabriel's story feels unfinished. The apology may have closed one chapter, but questions still linger. Was the sabotage real? Was it exaggerated? Or was it something entirely different that never reached the public eye? For Gabriel, the road ahead is narrow, but not impossible. History is filled with quarterbacks who fell out of favor only to claw their way back into relevance. Will Gabriel become one of those redemption stories? Or will this controversy cement his name as a cautionary tale of how quickly opportunity slips away? The Browns organization also sits at a crossroads. In the cutthroat business of the NFL, one wrong decision about who leads your team can set a franchise back years. Do they throw their full weight behind Sanders, making it clear he is the future? Or do they keep Gabriel around, risking more fractures in a locker room already divided by whispers? The front office's next moves could either solidify the team's path forward or spark a brand new round of chaos. And then there's the question no one wants to ask out loud: what else is still under the surface? In professional sports, the stories we hear are often just the tip of the iceberg. If sabotage rumors manage to leak out, what other tensions might be brewing inside that locker room? What conversations are happening behind closed doors, out of reach from cameras and microphones? One thing is certain, this isn't the last time Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel's names will collide in headlines. Whether as rivals, teammates, or symbols of two very different paths, their journeys are now intertwined in a way that fans and analysts won't forget anytime soon. Because in the NFL, stories don't end with apologies, they evolve, they twist, and they resurface when you least expect them. And as the season unfolds, one question hangs in the air, daring fans to keep watching. Who will rise and who will be left behind? If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.